The boardroom echoed with the hollow click of polished shoes. A billionaire, mid-40s, chiseled jaw, silvered hair, stood alone, wrists cuffed in cold steel, breathing raggedly beneath the blinding lights. Flashbulbs popped behind the glass walls as uniformed officers escorted him toward the elevator. His Armani suit, now wrinkled and stained with sweat, clung to his trembling frame. Cameras captured his humiliation, but his eyes were locked, haunted, on something no one else could see. Across the floor, standing beside a police officer, was a little girl, no more than 6, her dark curls bouncing, her face a perfect replica of the woman he once tried to destroy. The girl clutched a small teddy bear and stared at him, not with fear, but with confused familiarity. The elevator dinged. He turned his head one last time as the doors closed. A voice, calm, composed, damning, echoed in the background. He built an empire, but he couldn't save her. Fade to black. 3 hours earlier, the skyline shimmered in gold as dusk descended over the city. From the top floor of the Lucent Tower, the CEO watched the world below like a king surveying his kingdom. His name wasn't spoken, but everyone feared it. His empire, built on hostile takeovers, legal gray zones, and calculated cruelty, was unmatched. But tonight something cracked. He stood with his hands pressed against the glass, breath fogging the window, staring not at the horizon, but at a single photo on his desk. A woman, mid-30s, laughing freely, holding a child in her arms. His face wasn't in the picture. His jaw tightened. "You ruined me," he whispered. Not with hate, but heartbreak. The setting sun cast a long shadow behind him, splitting the room between light and dark. Somewhere deep inside that tower, his revenge plan ticked toward execution. But the photo haunted him now. Her joy was real. His anger suddenly felt counterfeit. In the heart of the tower's basement, servers hummed and monitors blinked. One screen counted down, 0324. The revenge algorithm, years in the making, would auto-deploy. Stocks would crash. Her startup, her legacy, would be wiped off the map. His assistant's voice crackled over comms. "We're alive, sir." He said nothing. His reflection stared back from the black glass. Somewhere between the man he was and the monster had become. Just hours ago, he'd relished the thought of her downfall. Now, guilt gnawed at his chest. "Pause the deployment," he muttered, barely audible. The assistant didn't respond. The timer ticked on. Outside the server room, a girl's laughter echoed faintly. Someone's daughter running down the hall. His pulse spiked. Not fear. Something deeper. Something terrifyingly human. She never expected to see him again. Not like this. The gala was supposed to be hers. A celebration of her startup's IPO, her triumph over every door slammed in her face. But there he was, standing in the back, watching with a silence that pierced through the applause. He didn't approach, just observed. Eyes locked on her like a man witnessing a ghost. She smiled for the cameras, raised her champagne, but her hands trembled. Their story had ended years ago, messy, unfinished. And now he was back, storm brewing in his gaze. Her co-founder leaned in, whispered, "Isn't that?" She didn't answer, just turned away, heart racing. Whatever he'd come for, it wasn't congratulations. The elevator rose in silence. He stood alone, staring at the floor numbers blinking upward. 39, 40, 41. Each floor closer to confrontation. In his coat pocket, a signed document. Her company's death sentence. One flick of his pen, and it would be over. No one else knew. Not yet. He'd timed it perfectly. Her speech would end, the market would crash, and she'd fall. But his grip on the paper faltered. His mind flashed to her laugh, the way she used to whisper ideas into the night, barefoot on hardwood floors. The elevator dinged. He stepped out, not with fury, but hesitation. For the first time, he wasn't sure if revenge was still the goal, or just a mask for something he didn't want to name. He was 10 when the bank took their house. Rain poured as movers dumped furniture onto the cracked pavement. His mother, thin, proud, trembling, stood between their belongings and the banker, shielding her son with her arms. "Please, just give us another week," she said. The man didn't flinch. The boy clenched his fists, watching strangers toss their life into the gutter. That day, something shifted. He promised himself he'd never beg, never be powerless, never let someone take what was his. As the tow truck pulled away with their old station wagon, his mother whispered, "Don't let the world harden you." But he didn't hear it. All he saw was the banker's silver pen, signing them out of dignity. One gesture. One decision. It would take him years, billions, and a heart hardened like stone. But he'd find that pen again. And this time, he'd be the one holding it. Years later, the boardroom welcomed him with marble floors and velvet lies. He'd made it, youngest partner in a cutthroat firm by 28. But power came with a taste for blood. He was a shark among sharks, and he played their games better than they did. Yet late at night, he'd sit alone in the office, staring at his reflection in the black window. He didn't see success. He saw the boy who once stood in the rain. "We built this from nothing," his colleague once told him. "No, I built this to make sure I'd never be nothing," he replied. He didn't chase glory, he chased immunity. But no amount of money made the nightmares quieter. No corner office softened the echo of that rainy eviction. He wasn't chasing wealth. He was outrunning the memory. She wasn't part of the plan. She was laughter in a world of litigation. He met her at a legal seminar, both speaking on opposite panels. She wore red and disagreed with everything he said. But when she smiled, it felt like rebellion wrapped in sunlight. He mocked her idealism. She mocked his cynicism. And yet he found himself lingering after every panel, hoping she'd look his way. When she finally did, it wasn't flirtation, it was challenge. "You think you can out-manipulate fate?" she said, sipping wine. He smirked. "I don't need fate, I have leverage." She tilted her head. "Then you'll never know what love without control feels like." He laughed that night, but her words burned deeper than he admitted. And in that moment, she became the one thing he couldn't own. Their first real date wasn't supposed to be a date. Just coffee, after a heated debate. But hours melted into stories, and stories into secrets. She spoke of her startup, how she was building something to outlast greed. He listened, pretending to scoff, but something in her voice softened him. "You build walls," she said. "I build bridges." He looked at her, jaw tight. "Bridges collapse." She leaned in. "Not if you walk across them together." The words caught him off guard. He hadn't believed in together for years. But that night he walked her home. And when she smiled and said goodnight, something inside him whispered he was already on the bridge. He just didn't know it yet. But love didn't erase ambition. As her startup gained traction, he found himself conflicted. She was everything he wanted, and everything that threatened his world. Investors she courted were ones he had crushed. Policies she fought for unraveled the systems that made him rich. "You can't change the rules," he once warned her. "You're afraid of a world you can't dominate," she replied. The rift widened. Late-night calls turned into missed calls. Dinners turned into silence. Still, when she held his hand, the world slowed. But the war inside him never did. And when he finally saw her name on a competitor's board, an acquisition he'd already planned, his heart froze. She wasn't just in the way. She was the way. And he didn't know whether to protect her or destroy her. He built his legacy one deal at a time, sacrificing hours, friends, and even holidays. While others slept, he studied contracts. While others loved, he leveraged. His penthouse became his prison, lit by screens and silence. Her texts went unanswered more often. "This isn't living," she once said, placing his untouched dinner in the fridge. "It's war," he whispered, eyes on spreadsheets. "And I'm winning." But each victory hollowed him. Shareholders cheered, his phone buzzed with praise. Yet every night he sat alone, staring at the clock. Success filled his bank account but drained his soul. One morning, as he watched the sunrise from behind blackout blinds, he realized he no longer remembered the sound of her laugh. Only silence. And in that silence, he wondered if the empire was worth the echo. She fought her own war, quietly, fiercely. Late nights in a cramped co-working space, her team fueled by ramen and belief. Investors doubted her, regulators dismissed her, but she never flinched. "We're not just building tech," she told her team. "We're building trust." While he climbed towers, she built bridges, one line of code, one pitch, one user at a time. But there were costs. Missed birthdays, calls home, the ache of pretending she was fine. She'd scroll through his news, his acquisitions, his face on magazine covers, and feel a strange mix of pride and fury. He had power. She had purpose. But purpose didn't always pay. When the server crashed during a live demo, she sat on the bathroom floor, holding back tears. "You okay?" her CTO asked through the door. She exhaled. "Ask me tomorrow." Their paths diverged, but the world kept crossing them. Industry events, press features, investor overlaps. Every time she saw his name, her pulse quickened. Every time he heard hers, his jaw clenched. Their story became industry lore, the idealist and the executioner. Yet behind the titles were wounds still bleeding. At a fintech summit, they passed each other in a hallway. No words, just a glance. But that glance burned. His hand brushed hers by accident. She didn't pull away. But she didn't stop either. 1,000 unspoken things hung in the air: regret, memory, maybe hope. As they walked in opposite directions, neither turned back. But both slowed their steps, just enough to betray the truth. Distance was safer than honesty. The closer he got to absolute power, the lonelier it felt. In a world where everyone had a price, he missed the one person who never took his. He tried to distract himself. New ventures, shallow relationships, louder deals. But nothing echoed like her silence. One night, he sat in his car outside her building, engine idling. He didn't go in. He just watched the window where her light used to be. A child's laughter floated down the street, then a woman's voice, soft, familiar. He looked up. There she was, stepping into the glow of a street lamp, holding a little girl's hand. Their eyes met. She froze. He nodded. She didn't smile. Just tightened her grip on the child's hand, and walked away. His heart shattered in silence. That was the cost. And it was already paid. He returned to his office and did what he did best, buried the pain in strategy. He launched a silent campaign, buying out the shell companies tied to her startup's next funding round. It wasn't rage. It was logic, he told himself. She was rising too fast. She threatened too much. But deep down, he knew, it was fear. Fear that she'd succeed without him. Fear that she'd forget him. The more he tried to corner her company, the more her image haunted him. Not the woman in boardrooms. The woman barefoot, laughing in the kitchen at 2 a.m. The woman who once whispered, "You don't have to conquer everything." But he didn't believe that then. And now, he wasn't sure if he was conquering her, or destroying what was left of himself. The email wasn't supposed to go to her. But fate, or maybe guilt, clicked send. She opened it just past midnight, alone in her kitchen, tea cooling beside her laptop. The subject line read, "Confidential. Acquisition timeline, Veil protocol." Her company. Her dream. Her future, targeted and dismantled piece by piece. Attached were internal memos, shell purchase orders, and, most damning, his signature. Her breath caught. She gripped the counter as her chest tightened. He'd orchestrated it all. The man she once held in silence had planned her ruin with boardroom precision. Rage roared up, but heartbreak followed harder. Not because of what he'd done, but because she hadn't seen it coming. Not from him. Not like this. She didn't cry. She stared at his name until the letters blurred. And then she whispered, "You were never mine." He didn't sleep. The next morning, his phone buzzed, her name on the screen. He let it ring. Then again. And again. On the third ring, he answered. Silence. Then, "How long?" she asked. His voice cracked. "Months." Another pause. "Why?" Her question wasn't fire. It was ashes. He couldn't lie. "Because I couldn't control what I felt. So I tried to control you." Her breath hitched. "You always said I was dangerous." He closed his eyes. "You were. You made me want to be better." She hung up. The line went dead. And so did something in him. He sat in his tower of glass, but the walls no longer reflected power. They reflected ruin. Not of a company. Of love. And for the first time, he couldn't negotiate his way out of the wreckage. She didn't hide. At a press briefing, she stepped into the storm. Cameras clicked. Questions flew. "What will happen to your company? Did you know he was behind it?" She stood tall, wearing resolve like armor. "We built this on purpose, not permission," she said. "We will not fall." The crowd erupted. But behind her eyes, war waged. Not with the media, but with memory. In the sea of flashing bulbs, she saw his face, not in the crowd, but in her mind. Every smile. Every betrayal. She smiled for the press, but her hands shook behind the podium. She'd fight like hell. Not to beat him, but to prove she didn't need to be saved by anyone. Especially not the man who broke her. His world didn't crash, it unraveled. Investors withdrew. Internal leaks emerged. One headline read, "CEO weaponized shell companies to destroy competitor." Also, his former partner. His board turned cold. His assistant, who once praised him, avoided eye contact. But the worst came from legal. "There's one entity you didn't account for," the lawyer said, sliding over a folder. Inside, incorporation documents. The majority of her company, transferred 2 years ago, to a trust. Created by him. For her. "You did this," the lawyer added, "before the split." He stared at his own signature, the paper shaking in his hands. He had given her the very weapon that saved her. And he'd forgotten. Or blocked it out. He hadn't just failed to destroy her. He had protected her. Subconsciously. Quietly. Entirely. He walked the city streets that night with no destination. No driver. No plan. Just the echo of her voice replaying in his mind. He passed billboards with his name, buildings he'd bought, offices he'd once ruled. None of it mattered. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped building empires and started erasing himself. In a quiet park, he sat on a bench beneath a broken streetlight. Alone. That's where the child found him, a little girl chasing her toy balloon. She stopped, looked at him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you sad?" she asked. He managed to smile. "A little." She handed him her balloon. "Then you can have this." Her mother called her back, unaware she'd just given the most powerful man in the city a reason to breathe. He looked at the balloon, bright red, rising against the night, and for the first time let go. The boardroom was packed. Executives lined a long table, lawyers at the ready, media reps waiting outside. He stood at the head, the center of attention for the wrong reasons. One final vote. Keep him on or cast him out. A lifetime of dominance now came down to 9 hands. He didn't plead. Didn't justify. He simply placed the signed acquisition reversal on the table, the one that would restore her company, dissolve the shell deals, and expose his own role in it all. "Before you decide," he said quietly, "read this. I'm undoing the damage I caused. Not for reputation. For redemption." Silence. Then murmurs. He stepped back from the head seat, the one he'd fought decades for. And just like that, the room shifted. Not with noise. but with the gravity of a man finally letting go. She received the news in a quiet elevator ride. Alone. The reversal was official. Her company was safe. His name was attached to the reversal. Not hidden. Not scrubbed. She clutched the press release with shaking hands. The reporter beside her, oblivious, chatted about stock surges. She didn't hear it. Her mind was lost in the collision of two truths. He tried to destroy her, and he also saved her. The doors opened. Cameras awaited her at the lobby, but she stayed still, staring at her reflection in the mirrored walls. "What does forgiveness even look like?" she whispered. No answer came. Just the soft chime of closing doors, and a heart still deciding whether to walk forward or turn back. They met again, not by accident, but by choice. A quiet rooftop bar overlooking the city. They both built and broke each other in. He was already there, nursing a glass of untouched scotch. She walked in, no security, no entourage. Just her. He stood, uncertain. She nodded for him to sit. "You didn't have to do it," she said. He looked out at the skyline. "I didn't know how else to say I was sorry." The wind picked up. She set down her phone. "You didn't just hurt my company. You hurt me." He met her eyes. "And I'll live with that. But I wanted to at least fix what I could." Silence fell like night. Then she whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you." He nodded. "That's okay. I finally forgave myself." The next day, headlines swirled. CEO steps down after reversing secret buyout. But he didn't read them. He was at a small bookstore, browsing quietly, unnoticed for once. She was across town, walking with her daughter, hand in hand, through a public garden. Different world. Same silence. In her mind, she replayed every word he said the night before. In his, every word she didn't. Neither called. Neither needed to. Yet both felt the same pull, that something had changed. Not fixed. Not forgotten. But real. He picked up a book she once loved. She stopped beside a bench they once sat on. And somewhere between regret and release, they both exhaled. For the first time, without weight. Later that night he returned to the tower, just once more. The office was dark, stripped of status, his name plaque gone. He walked through it slowly, touching nothing. Just remembering. The view still stretched endless, but the glass didn't reflect power anymore. It reflected change. He reached the corner where her photo once sat. In its place, a single note. Written, in familiar handwriting. "Thank you for stopping the storm, even if you started it." He read it twice. Then folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket. No tears. No monologue. Just the weight of finality. He turned off the lights, walked out, and left the door open behind him, not as a mistake, but as a message. Some doors are meant to stay open, even after you walk away. He started over. No headlines, no boardrooms, no entourage. Just a laptop, a small apartment above a bookstore, and the first honest project he'd ever worked on. A pro bono platform to help startups navigate predatory acquisition. No glory. No applause. Just quiet purpose. Sometimes he'd catch a news alert about her company's growth. She was thriving. He smiled, not with envy but pride. He never reached out. She never replied. But every update felt like a letter answered. The nights weren't silent anymore. They were peaceful. And in that stillness he met himself for the first time. Not the mogul, not the tactician, but the man who once promised his mother he'd never be powerless. And now he understood. Real power isn't control. It's release. She stood on stage, lights glowing, applause washing over her. Her company had just closed a landmark partnership, one that would protect thousands of small businesses. As she stepped to the mic, cameras flashed. "We didn't get here because of money," she said. "We got here because we refused to become the things that broke us." In the crowd, she spotted a familiar face. Not him, but a little girl holding a red balloon. For a second, Her voice wavered. Then she continued. Stronger. Clearer. She had forgiven him. Not for him, but for herself. Because holding on to the fire was keeping her from the light. And as the crowd rose in cheers, she smiled, not for the deal, not for the cameras, but for the peace that had finally landed. In a quiet mailbox on the edge of her office building, she found a single envelope, no return address. Inside, one photograph, the first prototype of her startup's app, printed and annotated. In the corner, his handwriting. You were right. It was always about bridges. No signature. No request. Just acknowledgement. She held it for a long time. There was no pain in it now, only a strange kind of peace. She placed it in her drawer beside old pitch notes and moved on with her day. But the smile stayed a little longer, and the weight felt a little lighter. Redemption, she realized, isn't loud. It's the quiet understanding that someone finally saw the truth and chose not to run from it. He visited his mother's grave for the first time in years. The wind whispered through the cemetery trees, sunlight breaking through clouds in scattered beams. He placed a single white lily on the headstone. I did what I promised, he whispered. I made sure I'd never be powerless again. But I also learned, power means nothing if it costs you love. He sat in silence, eyes closed. The city felt far away. The headlines, the losses, the revenge. It all faded into the soil. What remained was a man, stripped of armor, finally grieving not just what he'd lost, but what he never allowed himself to feel. And in that grief, there was healing. Real? Well, honest. Unfinished, but finally begun. Months later, their paths crossed once more. Unexpected, unscripted. A conference. A hallway. Just like before. She turned the corner. He was already there, holding the door open for someone else. Their eyes met, this time without tension. Without weight. Just recognition. She smiled, soft and real. He returned it. No words. No lingering. She walked past. He nodded once. And that was it. No grand reunion. No second chance. Just a shared truth. They had changed each other. Broken, maybe, but also rebuilt. They had walked through fire. And now they could finally walk away from it, not with regret, but with grace. Autumn arrived quietly. Leaves rustled against the stone steps of the public library, where he now volunteered twice a week, helping entrepreneurs draft their first pitch decks. He didn't give advice anymore. He asked questions. Why this idea? What would you risk for it? The room was smaller than any office he'd ever owned. But it was the first one filled with meaning. A young woman thanked him after a session. You should run something big again, she said. He smiled gently. I already did. And then I learned to build something better. As she left, he turned to the window. Across the street, a familiar figure passed with a child skipping beside her. He didn't wave. Just watched. Not with longing, but with quiet reverence. Sometimes, the greatest success is choosing not to interrupt peace. She framed the letter. The one with his scribbled note. It was always about bridges. It sat on her home office shelf, not as a reminder of him, but of who she became in spite of him. Her daughter often asked, "Who wrote this?" She'd smile. "Someone who taught me a hard lesson." The child nodded, content with the mystery. Later, as she worked late one evening, her daughter curled beside her, asleep with a toy laptop in hand. She paused, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. The past didn't haunt her anymore, it informed her. Her strength wasn't born from survival. It was built from choosing softness where pain had tried to harden her. And in that moment she realized, forgiveness was never for him. It was for her daughter, to show what healing could look like. They never met again. Not for coffee. Not for closure. Life, as it often does, moved on. But occasionally, they existed in the same cityscape, different corners of the same skyline. She saw his name once on a non-profit's donors list. He glimpsed her on the cover of a magazine about ethical innovation. Their stories, still entwined in spirit, had diverged in path. And that was enough. Not every story ends in reunion. Some end in resonance. A quiet knowing that the other still exists, still walks the earth with the lessons etched in memory. No bitterness. No regret. Just a shared history carried forward, not as baggage, but as blueprint. He sat at the beach one evening, wind brushing through his coat, waves murmuring their eternal rhythm. In his hand, a stone, smooth and unremarkable. He tossed it into the surf. No fanfare. Just a quiet goodbye to the man he used to be. Behind him, laughter from a family bonfire. He didn't join them, but he smiled. Peace didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrived like this, quiet, slow, persistent. And as he walked back toward the boardwalk, he whispered to himself, "You did all you could. And you stopped before it was too late." Redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing, again and again, to not become the worst version of yourself. And in that, he had finally succeeded. In the final frame, a child steps into a glass-walled boardroom. Not the one from the beginning, but one rebuilt. Brighter, dotty, warmer, Dandale. She climbs into a chair too big for her, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. On the table, a toy laptop, a drawing of a bridge, and a small nameplate that reads, "Founder." Her mother stands outside the door, watching quietly, hands clasped. The child doesn't see her, but the smile on her face mirrors her mother's exactly. And just before the screen fades to black, the narrator speaks. He left the company, but never left her. Then silence. Then breath.